Well, when it comes to investing in this country, one of the most popular areas for Canadians to invest is in real estate investment trusts, REITs. They are popular as steady Eddie businesses, known for their dividends. But of course, every business these days is navigating the uncertainty of COVID-19. And many of these businesses are based around people freely moving across this country. You can see what's happened to the real estate index this year being under performance. We're also talking today about that plan to potentially start to reopen provinces like Ontario for business. Let's get some more perspective on all of this. Ed Sonshine is the CEO of RioCan REIT, and Ed, kind enough to join us this morning. Ed, thanks for being back with us here on BNN Bloomberg.
Thanks for having me on.
Let's just start with what it's been like for you to manage your business during these uncertain times during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, it's obviously been something I've never experienced before, but you know, from the point of view of actually managing the business with technology, like what we're talking on right now, everybody working from home, that was the big adjustment. I think RioCan got into that very quickly, and everything seems to be working. Everything's moving forward. So that part, you know, has been interesting but workable. What's also been interesting is you know, the way our approach to tenants and their approach to us in this most unusual time, where, you know, obviously essentially the open tenants paid with no problem. I mean, supermarkets, drugstores, bank branches, LCBOs, they're all doing great. And you know, some of the larger tenants that I think they have better balance sheets than ours, although that can be difficult. Just didn't pay, and others did. So it was quite unusual, because sometimes I think tenants forget at the end of the day, a lease is just a contract pertaining to a particular space where we agree to let them use the space and perform certain other services like keeping parking lots clean, and they agree to carry on business and pay rent. And so when suddenly, you know, a bunch of our tenants just didn't pay on April 1st with a, you know, that was something I'd never really experienced before, and we're working our way through that now.
I'm hoping you can clarify a little bit, because I think a picture has been painted of small businesses who have had a cash crunch, aren't sure if they're going to stay alive and whether they can pay their bills. But you here are talking as much about some larger business. Which businesses were not paying their bills, or were not paying you guys?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, your clarification is quite correct. When it came to our smaller, I'll call it the independent retailers, which is a very, very important sector to us and to Canada, they represent about 15% of our overall revenue. And I would say what we did, well, I know what we did, is we offered all of them a 60-day deferral. Virtually everybody took advantage of it, not surprisingly. And these are the small restaurants, the nail salons, the apparel stores, you know, the independent shops, the hobby shop, you know, all the retailers that in many ways are the backbones of the communities in which our properties are situated. So we're working with them quite sympathetically, because, you know, with our balance sheet, we can afford to. But some of the larger, you know, largely American tenants, you know, I called out Staples in an interview with the Globe the other day. I don't think I want to refer to too many specific chains, but there are others like that who, interestingly enough, like I say, they have good balance sheets, but also they are doing a significant amount of business, you know, through e-commerce. And often fulfilling it through curbside pickups and, of course, delivery. So with them, you know, we're sort of taking the gloves off as we roll towards the end of April.
All right. Well, we'll watch for more details on that front. You know, it's very clear based on what you're saying that you had to have an action plan before we even heard from the federal government on some of these rent relaxation rules that were announced more officially in the last week or so. Do you think the plan that the federal government, I mean, obviously you have your own strategy already, but do you think what the federal government laid out is what can be a successful approach?
Yeah, I think it's a very good approach in principle. It's the fact of the tenant effectively having forgiven 75% of his rent, assuming they've lost at least 70% of their revenue, which most of the tenants I'm talking about have because they're closed and they're not big and sophisticated enough to have the kind of e-commerce facilities that some of the larger tenants I've mentioned have got. So to have them effectively have an abatement as opposed to a deferral of 75%, which 1/3 of it will actually be borne by the landlord and half will be borne by the government, I think is a very good plan in principle, because we want to keep these people alive, or all their employees will have nowhere to go back to work to, which becomes even more expensive for society and the government specifically. The details, I think, which are a little bit opaque, certainly to me and to some other landlords I've talked about, because somehow they've tried to tie it into mortgages and other things. And, the vast majority of landlords today, which I'll include all the pension funds who own all the big malls, which have a significant number of independent tenants of the type we're talking, and most REITs, certainly like RioCan, we have very few, if any, mortgages. So trying to somehow, I think that's more an issue of clarification and having the people who are going to administer the plan understand the way the industry actually works. But in principle, I think it's a very fine plan.
Speaking of government action, we are awaiting more details on Ontario's roadmap for getting back to business, how and when to reopen the economy. What's top of mind for you? Like, what would you like to see from the government, and what do you think is key to having a successful reopening, essentially, of our economy?
Well, there's an interesting thing, and here's what I think is key. I mean, sometimes over the course of the last, I guess, 6 weeks, this has been going on. I've thought about, well, why did they close all these stores, like bookstores? Why not just put rules on them right away and say, well, okay, a bookstore of 2,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet can have a limited number of customers come in. Why close apparel stores? I mean, why close everything, including parks? And it occurred to me that whether they thought about it or not, when they basically gave everybody a very good reason to stay home, being there's nowhere to go. And I think people are yearning for places to go. So I think they especially as the weather gets nicer outside, which we're actually getting some nice weather finally. So I think what the government has to do, and I think probably what they will do, is to stage a reopening over a period of, I hope weeks rather than months, because everybody's getting a little cabin fever. And every week that goes by, it's harder and harder for our retailers to dig themselves out of the hole that's been created by their forced closure. But I think as long as they do it in a manner where, in some ways, I'll say safety and health first, I think that's going to be a guiding line. I don't see why it can't be done relatively quickly. I mean, grocery stores are operating. Many construction sites are considered essential. Drugstores, other stores are operating. And you haven't heard about any real outbreaks or problems. The odd person obviously has taken ill, and each one is an issue. But if things are done with all these physical distancing and hygiene and the sanitation and disinfecting rules, but it's going to be hard for the retailers. It's going to be hard for us as landlord. We'll get used to it very quickly, and until we are through this whole pandemic by either the virus dying out or an effective vaccine, I think these kind of things, it won't be right back to the way it was before, but at least people will have places to go, and retailers will be able to do business from their bricks and mortar as well as doing business over e-commerce, and that's what we need to get this country going again.